when the final call would come. Nowhere to hide, nowhere to run. I'd stand alone, alone with him, saved by faith or damned in sin. A crazy, crazy thing that you once said to me. How would you say to love me and then turn your back and walk away? How would you say you love me and then turn your back and walk away? Darwin, evolution, Big Bang, strength. Those books are out of the classroom now. They won't go back in no way, no how. And you just might be right by me now. I could see the waves were set, no place where we could meet. A twisted knife for an unpaid debt. I never got to express my regret. Darwin,
You have arrived at the Ubuntu Summit. For our opening talk, welcome Philip Kavish.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Riga. How are folks dealing with jet lag, temperature changes? Somewhat? Well, don't fret. We have quite a hot event planned for the next few days. Is everyone excited? Wow, that's hard to top. You guys have been really good, and despite just after lunch, that's great. So it's time for another Ubuntu Summit, and I see a lot of familiar faces and new faces today. I'm proud to see so many of you coming from really all different corners of the world and cultures as well. It's kind of like a family reunion, but with fewer awkward questions about your personal life and a lot more talk about the open source ecosystem. So, who was here last year? Oh, that's not bad. How about new this year? Wow, that's a lot. Cool. So everyone who doesn't have their hand up, here's your chance to really create that welcoming experience in the true fashion of community. Maybe you have a new buddy sitting right next to you, so take some time to chat in the next refreshment break. Also, warm welcome to our remote participants. Sad that you couldn't make it this year, but I'm really happy that we have technology to help out with that, especially those with major time zone differences, also those that wanted to come but couldn't make it. We really miss you, and looking forward to doing a remote summit with you as well. So we created the Ubuntu Summit not only because we enjoy hanging out with you, but because we believe it is an opportunity to get better together. We want to create a space for the curious, the eager, the innovative, and the collaborative. We want to bring you those talks that capture the essence of outstanding in open source and really give you something to think about. But why, though? The Ubuntu community is a community of communities. We're bringing together projects with many different goals and direction. We thrive not only from what you contribute to Ubuntu, but also what you create that goes far beyond. If through what you encounter this weekend, you have an idea or an experience that would make things better on Linux and Ubuntu, follow those gut feelings. Use the opportunity to find someone like-minded and take that first step towards something new. Show the world something you feel proud of, and you will serve as an inspiration for others that will follow. So while Ubuntu is a beacon within Linux distributions, the real success is thanks to all of you. Can I get a round of applause for that? Last year's summit created inspiration for so many of you. It was the beginning of many ideas that led to collaboration and fulfillment. I'd like to highlight a few of those today. Bavi has been instrumental in reinvigorating the local Ubuntu communities. Thanks to his persistence and community building, the local Communities Council is running up for election again. With that, we've seen many new and returning local communities, and there's some great conversation happening between them to really talk about the problems that they're globally facing together. Statis from the open source team at the University of Macedonia in Greece has rallied together about a dozen students that are excited to contribute to open source. Together, they're planning regular events such as a Localizers Day and also install fests around the releases. That picture over there is their release party that they did around Ubuntu 2310, sorry. They celebrated the release of Mantic Minotaur, and where did they do that? Of course, at the home of the Minotaur on Crete. So that's really amazing what they've put together. And I would have loved to point them out, but unfortunately they couldn't make it short notice due to a few things. But listening remotely, thank you so much. Also, we've seen a bunch of new flavors since last year. Ubuntu Unity, Ubuntu Cinnamon, and Ubuntu. The dedication to build these flavors has obviously started before the last summit, but we're seeing a lot of new choices when it comes to Ubuntu. Specifically, would love to call out Amy, the leader of Ubuntu, right over there. When she visited the Ubuntu Summit last year, she was sad to hear that there was no current effort on Ubuntu for education. Coming nearly with 20 years of experience in education, she remembers using the former Ubuntu to connect children with technology. So today, Ubuntu 2304 is among the 10 official flavors, 10 now, of course, about the 10 official Ubuntu flavors. And did I say 10? A lot of times by now. Yes, we've reached 10 fundamentally different ways to experience Ubuntu, thanks to community members really following their passion. Also, breaking down the barriers between company and community, we have Jason from Canonical right over here. Jason has been building community around HPC and supercomputing. Instead of just waiting for the mandate or overcomplicating things, Jason took a few communication tools and it's really started a movement. We now have a good mix of researchers, developers, enthusiasts from the HPC world leading this community together to make the experience amazing. These efforts are beginning to have a wider impact on the tech and science community as well. So can I get the next round of applause for all the very cool people here? The Latvian community has put much effort into this event as well. They've been spreading the word like a wildfire at universities, local tech companies, and within their circle of friends. So who here lives in Latvia? Wow, look at that. Paldies, kā esat daļā no Ubuntu kopienas. How was that? Still learning a lot. These are just a few examples of stories that begin at the Ubuntu Summit. With 2.5 days to go and quite an amazing audience to interact with, here is your chance to create your own stories. No matter if it's the first chapter of your open source journey, or an episode that really captures the broader open source ecosystem, or the finishing touches on your masterpiece, here is your chance. Last year in the closing plenary, I mentioned how the Ubuntu Summit is all about connecting the corners of open source and creating something together that goes beyond what we can achieve individually, beyond Ubuntu itself. So if you look at the schedule this year, you will see even more signs of that. Here you won't just see your typical cross-section of open source project, but a curated collection of topics that are on the pulse of open source. You'll find industry leaders like DreamWorks talking about how they open-sourced Moonray, their production renderer. Projects on the forefront of sustainability in open source, such as Fairphone, Framework, and KDE's Echo initiative. Pioneer work to bring Linux to other platforms and hardware, such as Asahi for Apple Silicon, WSL for Windows, and Linux on RISC-V. Hot topics such as gaming, where Linux has really made quite an impact over the last year. Also, powerful use of Linux in science and research with a great collection of talks on HPC and supercomputing. You'll also experience sessions that are your entryway into the Ubuntu community. Our magnificent community leaders will show you what they've been up to, why this is an amazing place to be, and what's keeping them engaged. Let me tell you, we have some really seriously amazing folks in this community. There's people that are organizing large-scale events with hundreds of people, or also distributed over multiple cities on the same day. There's others that are building their own engaged user communities to flock around Ubuntu with a substantial number of users, or coordinating many contributors around other large software projects or distros that are based on Ubuntu. But it doesn't take a lot to get started. Meet up with a few friends, talk about Ubuntu. Be open to others joining and sharing their perspective. Talk about your meetups on Discourse to exchange ideas. Get together to hack a small tool that might make Ubuntu better. These are small but meaningful ways to step in the right direction. If you start like this, there's really no limits to what you can achieve. So I could stand here all day and talk about some of the great things I've seen, but please, see for yourself. So everything put together, you're in for an unforgettable summit experience. You ready for this? So let's make the summit so legendary that even those trolls on Reddit will want to become contributors. Now, before you wander off, I wanted to give the stage to the one person that believes most in Ubuntu, someone who has dedicated more than 19 years to Ubuntu and many more to the ecosystem around it. Please give a round of applause to Mark Shuttleworth.
Philip, Nathan, and to everybody here, thank you very much. A couple of thousand years ago, something remarkable was built. It was the Library of Alexandria. And it's sort of legendary, this idea that there was this place that held like most of the world's knowledge, everything that could be gathered, all the wisdom. I don't know what it looked like. I don't know whether it actually held all of the world's wisdom, or whether that was, really just the story that the people who built it were telling themselves. But I love this idea of accumulated knowledge and the sharing of knowledge that a library represents. But to benefit from the Library of Alexandria, you would have had to go to Egypt, right? Today, we have Wikipedia. Like, think of the modern equivalent of that. In real time, people all over the world bringing their knowledge together and sharing it so that in real time, people all over the world can benefit from what we've collectively can agree through some sort of editorial process. And I think of that as a knowledge counterpart to what open source is all about. Like, I continue to be completely inspired by the idea that open source is the Wikipedia of software. It is the Library of Alexandria of software. It's the way knowledge and wisdom, executable wisdom, kind of comes together for the benefit of everybody. And I think it's important to talk about this because Ubuntu only exists because of the open source community. And it's important for us to understand and appreciate and celebrate and honor that broader community. And I can think of three different sorts of anecdotes or vignettes or personality types that I really want to kind of credit. First, there's the brilliant, persistent, relentless genius that just wants to do something better, that is passionate about something, and whether it's for the love of the craft, or whether it's for a love of the audience, or whether it's just sheer science or curiosity, they go and build something and share it with the world. And we've all met, and I, generally treasured relationships, or we read about these incredible people who, just through sort of force of intellect and personality, do great things and then do it in open source. And there are some of them here today. You're going to meet them. I'm honored that they are here. But outside of this room, right, that's just an amazing thing that we should keep in mind, right? Those people could essentially keep that knowledge to themselves, but they don't. They put it out there for the world. The second thing, which is completely different, is these amazing, purely collaborative institutions, right? Arch, Debian, Nix, right? These things exist for the fun of it, for the exploration of an idea, a mission, and somehow magically they're a new kind of thing, right? They're not corporations, right? They're this new kind of thing. And those things to me are genuinely fascinating, right? It was my deep amazement and appreciation for Debian that made me think, okay, Debian needs a kind of fighting wing. That would be Ubuntu, right? But there's just something remarkable about those communities, right? Those groups where you get not so much the brilliance of an individual, but just sheer passion and collaboration. And it's very, very special for us to be sort of one example of that. They do incredible work. And then now, we also have the industrial faction, right? We have giant organizations representing, the leaders in industries, medicine, banking, finance, technology, obviously, aerospace. And those organizations are starting not just to benefit from open source, but to see how they can either strengthen their leadership or conduct some sort of industrial strategy to enhance their own interests, but also essentially to move their whole industry forward in many cases. And I think we should find ways to celebrate that, right? That's really incredible, right? Those are organizations. Traditionally, we stereotype organizations as being sort of inward-looking, greedy, and ultimately somewhat incompetent. But there's something incredible when you have giant, well-funded organizations putting amazing people on open source. That's something we just didn't have 20 years ago. So here we are at the Ubuntu Summit, and it would be completely wrong for us to take credit for all of those amazing groups' work, right? Of course. So I think it's really important that we remember, we celebrate our own small role, right? Which to me remains making all of those contributions easy to use, easy to consume, right? And each of those 10 logos that Philip put up, from Edge Ubuntu through Kubuntu, each of them is deeply passionate about taking either some subset of that software or all of that software and just making it reach a bigger audience, right? And for that, and for the people in those communities and their work, I'm incredibly grateful. All right. Philip, thank you very much. Nathan and the team that's organized, thanks very much for bringing us all together. I'm really looking forward to the presentations and the sessions and the workshops happening here at the summit, and I hope you folks all have a tremendous time. I'll see you this evening and at the party. Thank you.
Lagrit, Laipi Lukti Latia, Laipi Lukti Ubuntu Sumita. Welcome everyone. I'm so excited to be here for the second Ubuntu Summit. I was really happy to be here for the first Ubuntu Summit, although that was a little while ago. The neat thing, the amazing thing about Ubuntu is that it seems like it's been around forever. Ubuntu turned 19 years old just last month, like 2 weeks ago. I remember when Ubuntu was first announced. I liked Linux. I tried a couple different distros. Things were difficult. I lapsed for a bit. And next thing I know, I have an itch. I want to try Linux. And this announcement came out. I read it on Slashdot. Remember Slashdot? A Debian developer is going to make a Debian-based Linux distro that will be released on time every, what did they say, every 6 months. Every 6 months, polished Debian every 6 months, and it will be built around an inclusive community that's welcome and friendly. I read that on Slashdot, and I thought, okay, maybe 6 months, that's really aggressive. That's the thing. It can be done. But the community, I don't know if anyone remembers any Linux forum in 2004, but they didn't stay friendly for long because it was really hard to use Linux. And that knowledge was hard-won, and some of it was hard-won from the 70s, from Unix. And so there was a lot of elitism, and there was a lot of feeling that if you come in and ask questions, you should have done all your homework. Well, that homework was really difficult to do sometimes, especially if you're coming from DOS, from Windows. And so I thought, yeah, I don't think this is going to last. Great idea. I'm glad someone tried it. We'll see. I give it a year, 2 years tops. 6 months later, Slashdot was milling and buzzing about Ubuntu 5.04. And they were really excited about it. And I thought, well, that's kind of strange because Linux is free. You can download it. Why would they still be excited if there wasn't something there? Maybe I should check it out. So I went online, I went to shipit.canonical.com and ordered, I think it was 50,000 CDs, I think you could order for free. Okay, I think I ordered 20. And I started my, I think, 3 to 5 hour download of Ubuntu on DSL. Much better than the 5 CD set of some other Debian and other distros. And I said, I'll try it on my laptop, which of course immediately failed. And I put in no API-C and tried again, and everything worked. And it was amazing. I said, this is interesting. Maybe I'll stick with this on my laptop. And after a week or so, I found some problems, went online to the Ubuntu forums, did some searches, and the funniest thing was that every single time I would look for someone asking a question, I'm like, oh, I see in the title, they're gonna get flamed for that. I'd go in, and people say, that's a little vague, and we need a little more information, or sometimes this happens, you try this. And every place I turned, it was astonishing. No matter what happened, I'd look this post, that post, other places online, other forums. Every single time Ubuntu was brought up and asked about, people would get, well, there are of course some really great expert questions and discussions, but all the newbie questions. In the old days, someone would ask, how do I boot Linux? Or how do I do this easy thing? How do I change my resolution? And in the old days, they'd always say, the answer would be RTFM. You don't see that too much anymore. So for those of you who don't know what that means, it stands for Read the Fine Manual. And people were greeted with people who were really enthusiastic to help. And then when they did help and the people came back and said, thanks, that solved it, people were really excited. Or people say, how do I get involved? They say, here's a resource, here's a resource. And the other thing Ubuntu was really revolutionized. What really set Ubuntu apart was that it wasn't just the coding and all the technical knowledge, but they also wanted people to write documentation. They wanted people who could help other people. They said, if you're a community contributor and you are helping out, we value and recognize that. It was in California, after a couple years, after a couple months, I started saying, I used Ubuntu for a month. I said, what, I need to tell everyone about this. I was handing out CDs. I took my 50,000 printed Ubuntu disks and we're handing those out, giving them at libraries, all over the place. And by 2007, I said, I think the local community team project had just started. I said, I want to start a California team. So I said, well, I'll do my due diligence, I'll Google it, and sure enough, someone had just done it a week before. Neil Bussett had started that out, and I jumped in and I said, I want in. And a little bit later, a Southern California conference said, hey, Ubuntu, we saw that you're online at your local team. Ubuntu's getting really big, would you like to do a booth? And I said, sure. So the three of us went there, got our red, yellow, and orange plastic tablecloths from Paper City and Party City, and some discs we ordered from Ubuntu and for Canonical, and we stood there. We were right across from the Debian booth, which threw attendees for a loop. But the Debian developers we over said, "Hi, sorry, we're Ubuntu." Like, "Oh, we're glad you're here." They were nice, and we just talked about Ubuntu. Now, the interesting thing about that. We were very new. The only reason that we were Ubuntu ambassadors was because someone asked us and we lived nearby. So there was a lot of imposter syndrome. But we did our best. Everyone at the conference, the Southern California Linux Expo, it's almost like this. It's very friendly. So we felt very welcomed, even with Debian across the way. Next year, I think they were behind us. We were back to back. And what was really difficult early on, is someone who had just for about, at the time it was, when did they do the conference? So probably about 5 months we had said, we were going to be the California team. And people would come up to the booth. And they say, oh, hey, yeah, I tried Ubuntu. It was wonderful. Everything just worked. It's amazing. Thank you so much for making Ubuntu. Now, I stood there and I thought, well, I hadn't made anything. And so and I was like, oh, you're welcome. A lot of people make Ubuntu, but we're glad you like it. And the next year, the same thing happened. People would come up. People had problems with laptops and drivers and so on. But mostly they'd say, I love Ubuntu, thank you. And we got a little more aggressive at saying, well, you're welcome, we appreciate that. Now, on Reddit, I'm a moderator of the Ubuntu subreddit. Every so often we get these stories. People say, I had an old computer, I always wanted to learn more, I use this, I needed to learn Linux for school or for whatever, from a project. And they say, I had an older laptop or older computer that, wasn't doing anything. And I installed Ubuntu on it, and now it works again. It's faster, everything works, it's up to date. I have the best software. Thank you so much. I want to express my gratitude. And if I see the post, I'll jump in. I said, you are welcome. We make Ubuntu just for you. And that's what makes Ubuntu special. It's for everyone. Ubuntu is an ancient African philosophy. And it's not a cool name that Mark made up. But one of the things I thought was so audacious, really, when I first heard the name and the philosophy, I'm like, that is such a broad goal, and yet perfectly explains what free software and open software is. I think the only more audacious and funny thing was to call your company Canonical, which also got laughs at the time. Ubuntu is an ancient Xhosa and Zulu philosophy. You often hear it's being explained as humanity towards others. Ubuntu is the idea that in your community, if you help your neighbor, someone in your community, and you help them and you lift them up, not only do you lift up that person, but in doing so, you lift up your entire community. And therefore, you lift up yourself as well. And to me, that's what free software is all about. And so when I heard that Ubuntu was starting up, I thought, that is a lofty goal. I don't think anyone can do it. Not forever. 19 years later, I've never been happier to be wrong. And that's what's exciting to be here with all of you and with everyone remotely on the live stream and those of you who will watch the replays later, is that it took me a while to be happy that I could say, I'm Ubuntu. I'm not a coder. The only source contributions I've done was I ran the desktop wallpaper competition for a couple years. And so those are my first Debian package contributions to Ubuntu, and they were welcomed after some tinkering with, I think the design team fixed the first couple submissions. But I'm an Ubuntu member because I ran a booth, and if in the free software world, if you do something and you're enthusiastic and you do a good enough job, it's not disastrous or it's correctable, then you can do it again. Nobody stops you. So I ran that booth over and over again. We're going to do it a 16th time, actually, early next year. Thank you. But from running that booth, we kept going. I became the leader of the Ubuntu local community team. And I became a member of the Ubuntu local community council. And now I'm a member of the Ubuntu Community Council. And there's nothing special about me other than that no one told me to stop. But I wasn't a tech whiz. I understand a lot of the technical stuff. I understand displaced managers, X a little bit, Wayland a little less. I understand init. I understood Upstart. Systemd I don't understand, but qualified people were dealing with all that stuff, and I didn't have to. Anytime there's something I'm into, I can change it. Anytime there's something I'm not, I just ignore it, and really smart people make it happen. That's what's nice about Ubuntu, is that I could write documentation. I could help people. I could answer questions and explain things. And that was enough to become an Ubuntu member. And so everyone has a way they can contribute. So for all of you who are here and being excited and attending the talks and asking good questions of the speakers, for all of you who are on the live stream watching this because you really love Ubuntu and you just want to know more about it and getting started, or those of you on Discourse, the Ubuntu Community Hub, those of you on Reddit, those of you on the Ubuntu forums, those of you on Stack Exchange, Ask Ubuntu, any fan forum anywhere, where you see someone asking, how do I get started? what Linux distro should I pick? I've never run Linux before. What, how do I make, how do I put Linux, or how do I put Ubuntu on a USB disk so that I can get started and install it? If you've seen those questions, if you've upvoted them for visibility, if you've answered them, you are part of Ubuntu too, a major, giant part of Ubuntu, because aside from all the technical, amazing things that Mark spearheaded and Debian spearheads and all these companies do, it's a great community. All the software comes in a big cauldron pot. It was just Halloween, so just imagine that. It all comes together. What's most important is not just the technology. It needs to be there, it needs to be stable, it needs to be secure, it needs to be easy to use and accessible. And a lot of people work on that. But if you can't work on that, instead you can make it more welcoming, you can help other people. That is such an important and big part of making software accessible and exciting and fun to use. Now, if you go to any official Linux forum for any distro, no matter what distro it is, you will find that more or less people are really nice and kind as a whole. There are some flame wars, there are people who say, why didn't you read the documentation? That always exists. But at the time Ubuntu was envisioned, we stood out. It was really, really special. It was such a good idea and made Ubuntu so popular so quickly that nowadays everybody does it. You're expected to be civil. Not on the fringe fan forums, and that's okay. There's a place for that too. And some of the flame wars are kind of fun. For example, if I ask you, here's one that always gets laughs. Raise your hand if your favorite text editor is VI. Okay. Now, keep your hand up. If the reason it's your favorite is because you tried it a few years ago and still haven't figured out how to quit. Right. 20 years ago, that would start a fight. Now, I think Nano is the new Ed. I think that's my favorite text editor. Yeah. But we're passionate about our workflow, the tools we love. But 20 years ago, you could fight, people would unironically fight about what's the best text editor and why can't other people see reason. Today, I can tell that joke, and everybody laughs because everyone, we have our favorites, right? So Ubuntu's really changed the tide of that as well. And so when I was here last year, I had been a part of the Ubuntu community for about 17 years, actively, using Ubuntu for 18 and a half years. I waited until, sorry Mark, I waited till May, 2 weeks after 504, and I said, okay, there's something here, I tried it. And then I said, well, I should have tried this 6 months ago. So I've been using it for a long time, and when I come to these events, when I run a booth, and people come in and are, when snaps were announced, when the Ubuntu Phone was announced, and snaps were announced, when Windows Subsystem for Linux was announced, when Unity was announced, when going back to GNOME was announced, all those times, I'm at a booth, I'm the face of Ubuntu, people come up to me, and they just want a person to ask questions to, and say, what does this mean? With WSL. Should I be concerned? With GNOME, how is that working? Is that going to be something weird, or is it happy? And of course, I'm always positive, and you have to be friendly, which is easy to do. But I say, this is what's going on. This is what works. This is the cool thing about this. And people always go away and say, thank you for that. That makes me happy. So that makes me, more reassured. It's important. Positivity. Optimism is good. Now, blind positivity is not so healthy. But we have so many great things to be happy about in the Ubuntu community, and it's such a positive place. Now, coming to Ubuntu Summit, I knew a ton of people here. I know how amazing it is every time Ubuntu people get together. It's like everyone's in a good mood, everyone's happy. It's just a generally welcoming thing. I remember some very, very some of the younger contributors who were very new, had never been to an Ubuntu event before, were here. Some of the podcasters and media were there, and I talked to them, and I said, so what do you think about this summit? I knew what I was in for. It was exactly as wonderful as I planned. It was amazing. I was kind of expecting it. I kind of took it for granted. And I remember that the one comment I got over and over and over again from newcomers last Ubuntu Summit was, what I can't really believe is how welcoming and friendly every single person I've ever talked to or run into is. The talkers are super friendly, they answer the questions nice, you run in the hallway, there's no ego, they're not pretentious, they're like, hi, how are you? One person said to me, anytime I walked by a group of people, you could tell that they were really in this group, there was on this team, and they were just talking, and I'd hear something that was sort of interesting, intriguing, and I'd stop and pause for a second to hear, what they were talking about. And he said, every single time I did that, they'd see me say, hey, pull up a seat, join us, what do you think? He said he didn't meet one group of people who weren't welcoming. Now, I took that for granted. I thought that was nothing special. That's how you're supposed to act when you're in an Ubuntu event. But maybe that should be normal. But it isn't always. So for all of you who are doing that hard work, being welcoming and friendly, so while you're here, those of you here, obviously, be welcoming and invite people, be inclusive. But remember that it makes an impression. It ripples outward. I think Ubuntu has really changed the Linux ecosystem for the better. Not technologically, which every improvement any distro makes raises the bar, but in friendliness and welcoming and inclusivity. So I'm very, very proud to be here at the Ubuntu Summit. Number 2, next year's the 20th anniversary. I can't announce this, I assume there's going to be a third one, we'll see. No one told me. But it's something amazing. And so this year is going to be something special. There are a billion different talks. I wish I could be at every single one of them, but unfortunately I can't. So I do want to talk about some different things. I went a little bit. So here's some housekeeping. But, so I want to thank everyone here for my open source journey, my Ubuntu journey. We're all part of it. And so I want you, before I go on and do the boring housekeeping stuff, we are all Ubuntu, all of us. All of you here, all of you on the live stream, people viewing there, even people on Reddit. So give yourselves all a giant hand. Okay, so first off, there's a bunch of housekeeping things here. Some of you might already know this because you may have checked your email today. Good news. Every single day, we have an email prepared for you. It goes out, I think, by 6 a.m. local time, and it will tell you what to expect. No crossed fingers, I saw that. Every 6 a.m. local time. So it will tell you basically what to expect for that day, some highlights. Of course, we have the web page that has the timetable of all the talks. There's some specific things. So read that every day. It's not boilerplate. Somebody sat down and writes it every single day, and it's done specially. It's not automated. It's not spam. So a couple fun things. First of all, we have a group photo tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. right here. In the plenary room. So if you want to be in the group photo, 11 a.m. right here, and that's always a big fun thing. It makes a great photo for our slides for next year's summit. Some other things too. On the topic of photos, we're all wearing lanyards. I'm not. I'm on stage. I'm a VIP. And also, it rustles with the mic. They told me, please don't wear it. So we're all wearing lanyards. So if you see someone wearing a white lanyard, they're expressing their desire to not be photographed or videotaped. So please respect that. And when you're posting your photos on social media with the hashtags, which were in the email, hashtag Ubuntu Summit, hashtag Ubuntu Summit 2023, and so on, check your emails. Do double check that you didn't accidentally get someone in there, and make sure to crop the photo before you post it to social media. People have a billion different reasons not to be photographed or not be published, so please respect that. And then if they have an orange lanyard, you are A-OK. Of course, you can also always just ask people, hey, can I take your picture? Nothing wrong with that. But white lanyard means they've already answered. Let's see. We want to do a thing. What's the next slide? So I just was up here talking a lot about how awesome we all are at Ubuntu events and how awesome we are in the community. And that's due to the Ubuntu Code of Conduct. Now, any of you who are Ubuntu members, like myself, we've read it, we've signed it. If you have not read it, you can. Here's a QR code, and you can go and visit that. It's very easy, very simple. I'll sum it up really briefly for the purposes of housekeeping. Basically, it means be excellent to each other. When you are after hours and at the one of the parties, or you're at the bar and people start talking about why Emacs is better than VI, or why Pico is better than, or not Pico, why Alpine is better than Mutt, or whatever the other thing is. It's a good humor, respect each other, be kind, and so on. You know, there's no reason to fight about these things. If you don't like something, you can uninstall it or install something else. Or you can give them persuasive arguments. Does it have this feature? You can convince them. So respect each other, be kind. That's what makes Ubuntu special. I don't actually think that's going to be a problem here. For you live streamers, remember that on Reddit, please. I can delete your comment. Let's see, we have, so as I'm talking about getting together and chatting and having fun, some of you couldn't make it. Or some of you want to keep talking afterwards or get together. We have a great Ubuntu Summit Telegram channel where we have a giant group where you can join in and chit-chat with other attendees. So it's more like an extended virtual hallway track that persists even after we kick you all out of the hallways for the night. And some of you say, well, Telegram is proprietary, and I like free software. So do we. We love free software. So we also have an Ubuntu Summit Matrix channel that you can also join in. They are bridged. So you will get the same content and the same attendees and same hallway track, no matter what you choose. So you are all set. Let's see. So we have swag bags. So there's an afternoon break that is at 4 o'clock, and you can get your swag bag then. Those of you who are flying in tomorrow and are watching on the live stream and saying on the plane and saying, oh no, what now? Well, you can get your swag bag anytime during the summit on days 2 or 3 on Saturday or Sunday. So don't worry. If you don't pick it up, you get busy chatting with someone and you miss it, you can get it tomorrow. Not a problem. We have a lot of great talks coming up, and we have as well a welcome reception tonight. And I'm glad they gave me a clipboard. I think they moved it. So we have a welcome reception from 6 to 8 right here in the Radisson Blue, Latvia, halls 1 and 2. So you're about in the right place, and that's where you can come along, and it'll be fun. We'll get together and chit-chat and so on. And that's all the housekeeping I have. So check your emails every day. Be nice, be awesome, be excellent to each other. Be awesome, attend the talks. We have so many amazing things to talk about. The hallway track's always the best part. We have some great talks coming up. And thank you for being a part of this Ubuntu community. We have a great talk coming up at 3, which is a little bit of a longer break than we usually have. So normally we're going to have a little 5-minute break between talks. Some talks we're going to have a longer break between. But we are also going to have refreshment breaks. We're going to have lunch, of course, tomorrow and Sunday. And we're going to just have a good time. We're going to have fun. We're going to learn a lot about Linux and other cool technologies, not just about what Ubuntu and Canonical are doing, but what other companies and projects and teams and communities are doing with Ubuntu, whether that's technologically, something cool, whether it's something cool like how to print, the printing subsystems, all the technical things, or how people are building projects, or how people are coming together and forming local community teams that advocate for Ubuntu and provide local support in a location where it's off the beaten trail, in languages where you don't necessarily see a lot of support. All those are happening by just regular people who love Ubuntu, like all of you. So have fun, enjoy the summit, and there'll be another talk next talk is at 3 p.m. So take a break, and we'll see you back in a couple of minutes.
time would make us feel permanent, but then came the sun unexpectedly. In the day, standing tall, we got your mother's call. She said she needed you at home, and you just stared at your hand, holding a grain of sand. You let it fall to your feet, then you said, dance with me. And I did so willingly. There's lights on the radar screen, keep pulling away.
Welcome back, everyone. Our next talk is called From Origins to Open Source, the journey of DreamWorks Animation's production path tracer, Moonray. And so I'd like to welcome to the stage Randy Packer from DreamWorks.
How about now? Okay, that works. Hello, this is exciting. Thank you everybody for joining. My name is, as you mentioned, my name is Randy Packer. I am Senior Manager at DreamWorks Animation, managing a few teams, including the render and shading team, which are the engineers that built Moonray, our production path tracer, which I'm going to talk about today. Now, I've done this before, sort of, in front of podiums, and I know myself, so as the instant that I stand up in front of a podium, all the memory in my head pages out and gets swapped in with complete void. So I'm going to read speaker notes pretty extensively, but they are my own words. They are not marking copy or anything like that. So with that said, let's get started. So here's what we're going to review: an introduction to ray tracing that's suitable for a PhD program. Sorry, I mean succinct enough to fit into our time slot together. I'll introduce Moonray, the production renderer used for all the feature films at DreamWorks. Moonray was built on modern computing architecture with the intent to provide interactive scene visualization with the ability to selectively scale compute resources to suit each artist's workflow. We'll look at how Moonray's development took place, and finally, we will discuss DreamWorks' motivation to open source this technology, which happened earlier this year, along with the journey to get it out the door, and what's next. An MCRT renderer tries to emulate real-world light transport as accurately as possible, at least when we want it to. Sometimes we bend the rules to depict very unique and inventive worlds. And I should mention, most of the images that you're going to see in this slide deck were renders from Moonray. So to give a background refresher for anybody who doesn't know ray tracing, I'm going to describe it in very simple terms here, specifically the naive approach of forward ray tracing, or basically how particle transport works in the real world and how we humans are able to see things. Here we have a simple scene with a light source, some sort of polygon object in a sphere floating in space, and this green happy face that is looking at the scene. First off, our light source emits photons. And since we don't know if a photon is a particle, or a wave, or a field, or all three, let's simplify our approximation and call it none of these things. Let's just pretend it's rays of energies and visualize what those rays are doing. Here we see our light source is emitting rays in all directions. And we'll follow just one of those rays that reaches the surface. Now, the surface isn't smooth, so it's going to reflect light into the environment in multiple directions. One of those directions is towards the eye of our viewer, so they can see the polygon directly. But light will also be bounced towards other objects in the environment, and once it reaches that other object, it will also scatter light based on its surface properties. And one of those directions is towards the eye. But perhaps it's also transparent, and so it will refract light through the object, and some will scatter out the back, but some will also be reflected back again through the object, and potentially reach the eye. Now, this is clearly simplified, but it should give you a basic idea. If we wanted to simulate this on a computer, we need to start tracing umpteen billions of rays from the light source. Umpteen is a technical term that managers like myself like to use. However, only a vanishingly small percentage of light rays would ever reach our viewer's eye, so we'd be wasting an awful lot of computation. So in computer graphics, we turn this around. We simulate this with backward ray tracing and turn the problem around. In backward ray tracing, or simply what we call ray tracing, we put a grid of pixels in front of the eye and trace rays into the scene to see if they eventually hit any light sources. In this way, we immediately eliminate all the light rays that never reach the eye, so we've already optimized our task. Then for each pixel, we trace a number of rays. Now, if we only traced one ray per pixel, you would see a very blocky version of the scene. But as you trace more rays per pixel, you get a better approximation of the final correct result, and thus it looks smoother. That's a side note. For now, let's concentrate on just one ray at a time, since the process is the same for each one. Let's start with this pixel, and we see that the ray intersects the sphere, and it will send out refraction rays. At the sphere's surface, we use importance sampling to pick good directions to sample in the scene, and we shoot rays out in those directions. We achieve this because we know which directions a light emits the most energy and which directions a surface reflects the most energy, and instead of shooting rays out in all directions equally and wasting compute, we can choose from those directions and combine the probabilities using what we call multiple importance sampling. Yes, one ray from the eye fractures into multiple rays as it encounters each surface. And some of its surface rays will hit other objects, and other rays from the scene will also hit those objects, but at different angles and thus different sample patterns. And we keep this up until eventually something finds a light shining on it, and we return the color of a pixel. And that's what a renderer does. It paints a pixel. Repeat this over billions of rays, and an image comes out at the end. So where does a path tracing renderer like Moonray actually fit into the feature film production pipeline at DreamWorks? Here you can see various departments involved in the process, and while not always strictly linear, there is a certain flow to upstream departments handing over to downstream departments. Now clearly, there's one spot indicated here and with a green arrow that absolutely needs to be there, which is rendering or capturing all the final frames that make up our movies. However, rendering happens in many departments during the course of the show as artists iterate and refine their work over the course of that production. So let's continue. Moonray is our high-end production rendering system. It replaced Moonlight, a deep frame buffer micropolygon rasterization system. We were by no means the first major studio to make the change from micropolygon rendering to path tracing, but we learned a lot from those who went before, and we approached the problem with a ground-up rewrite. As I mentioned previously, it is a Monte Carlo path tracer, or MCRT for short, 100% ray traced, it's easy to use, and provides artists with fast iterations. It can be integrated into a wide variety of digital content creation tools, or DCC tools for short, such as Houdini, Maya, Katana, Blender, an in-house lighting tool, etc., with an appropriate plugin or as a USD Hydra rendered delegate. And I'll explain that last part a little bit later. Moonray's algorithm is best described as backward path tracing with next event estimation and multiple importance sampling. Internally, we provide Moonray as a service to our clients or our shows via our in-house cloud framework, which we call Eris. Not only does this simplify application integration, but it also allows Moonray to take advantage of massive machine-scale distributed rendering. So Moonray can render images that are photoreal. The glass on the left is rendered, the one on the right is real. A coral dragon, for instance, this asset came from Shrek. We made it translucent in this image. Or we can render the more fantastical, such as glittery dancing trolls. Shaders are plugins to the renderer that describe lights, materials, geometry, etc. Moonshine is a package of capable production shaders that are included with the open source Moonray repository. Here we have a wireframe mesh of our version of the standard Shaderball 3D model. We've open sourced this model on the Open Moonray website. We can shade it in a plastic diffuse material in multiple colors. We can make it glossy or like glittery car paint, iridescent, scratched and aged bronze, translucent. We can layer materials on top of each other, like this kind of frightening skin in copper, or water on plastic. Or we can simply flood the room, or create something cool for Halloween. We wrote Moonray from scratch, leveraging state-of-the-art open source components where appropriate. No studio legacy code was used. The architecture is cleanly divided across 3 different APIs. The rendering API for clients to initiate rendering, the shading API for development of pluggable shaders or materials, and the procedural API for the development of geometry generators. We use best-in-class open source libraries. So not only are we open source, but we also use a lot of open source in the product. Embry is our ray intersection engine, initially developed by Intel for Moonray and in collaboration with us, and then later open sourced by Intel. We use OpenImageIO to generically handle different image file formats. It was written by a developer from Pixar, then NVIDIA, and then Sony when he got tired of writing the same library at every company he went to. OpenSubdiv is an open source geometry library contributed by Pixar with major improvements from DreamWorks. OpenColor.io is an open source color management library contributed by Sony with an emphasis on visual effects in computer animation. OpenEXR is a professional-grade image storage format in wide use in the motion picture industry. It was developed and contributed by Industrial Light and Magic. OpenUSD is an open source scene description specification developed by Pixar and recently founded in alliance with Adobe, Apple, Autodesk, and NVIDIA to promote the standardization and evolution of the technology. And OpenVDB is a volumetric representational data format and set of tools that we developed and open sourced at DreamWorks that has transformed movies. In fact, if you have seen a VFX movie or a TV show with explosions, fire, water, or fog since 2015, then you have seen OpenVDB in action. It swept through our industry so rapidly that 4 of our developers won a SciTech Academy Award, these are the same people who do the Oscars, for it the very next year after we released it. That is tremendously fast for a SciTech Award that generally waits years to ensure that there is a positive impact in the industry, and we are very proud to have spearheaded that. So, all renderers have personalities. Keeping all the lanes, ... is our mantra and our personality, and a key aspect of our vectorized architecture. This is our guiding principle for development. Our goal was to achieve scalability up to real-time rendering and leveraging all the available hardware. The need to trace and shade billions of rays implied thin interfaces and no data structure redundancy. We embraced data-oriented design, which is a methodology that first grew in the games industry, but we applied it with great success in Moonray. Compared to vectorization, which I'll discuss in a moment, multi-threading is quite straightforward. First, we divide the frame into 8x8 tiles. Idle threads are pull the next tile from the queue and begin work. And we have some techniques to ensure that the artist gets a rough pixelated image quickly and that computation proceeds without any locking, so we avoid Amdahl's law of diminishing returns when coordination is required during multi-threading. And here are the results. Exactly what we like to see, all threads fully loaded. Let's talk about vectorization. This is the process of setting up blocks of computation where the same instructions can be executed simultaneously on different chips, or SIMD as it's called in the industry. Modern chips provide a large number of vector lanes. Moonray ray data flows in and out of queues that prepares the data to be bundled into the SIMD vector pipeline. On AVX2 chipsets, for instance, we can perform 8 operations for the price of 1. Let's look at some results. Here's Astrid from How to Train Your Dragon in a test T-pose. There's a lot of fur and hair in this scene, and the biggest block of time at the bottom in blue, the incoherent rays, is spent inside of Embry, Intel's open source intersection library that we developed in conjunction with and for Moonray. Since Embry is already well vectorized in both our scalar and vectorized code paths, we don't expect to see an improvement in this area, nor do we see any improvement. However, we do observe significant gains in shading, texturing, and integration, and despite the overhead for vectorizing the scene, we see a good result with about a 37% performance improvement overall. Most commercial ray tracers are structured such that the digital content creation tool, DCC, like Maya, Houdini, Blender, etc., run the render inside of their own process. This makes the process quite large, and if either the renderer or the application have a problem, both end up crashing. As I mentioned, Eris is a thin layer API for rendering. The artist can start moonray as a separate process on the same computer, or they can run it on a separate computer. This enables the artist to use a lighter weight computer with a beefier backend for rendering. Or, for even better performance, you can distribute the rendering onto multiple remote blades to accelerate the interactive display for the artist. Thanks to not locking, the speedup obtained is linear with the amount of computation added, and this is robust to a failure of a node. If a remote computers fail for any reason, the render continues, but at just that percentage slower. This architecture, while seemingly simple, has produced linear speedups on clusters of up to 96 hosts. That's the most we've tested because it's the most the execs authorized for testing purposes. And you can see at 40 hosts, we show 40 times speed up over a single host. And just to really reinforce the definition of linear here, a test from our Glendale location to 96 blades in the Azure West US region, we saw 96 times speed up over a single host. Each host had 128 gigabytes of memory, 64 hyper-threaded cores. This demonstrates the commitment we've had to never locking or waiting on the results of another computer or computation. So I mentioned Hydra Render Delegate before. So Pixar had released a scene description format called USD for Universal Scene Description, which contains a definition for a Hydra Render Delegate that defines a common interface for renderers. You can think of this a little bit like a PostScript interface. You've got many applications in the world that can write a PostScript file, and you've got many printers that can accept a PostScript file and print on it. In a similar way, you can think of Hydra as a standard interface that eases the integration of renderers into artist tools. Moonray supports the standard features you would expect in a production renderer, such as the ability to use light path expressions to select and isolate certain light paths in order to do post-rendering compositing operations. You can think of this as something like regular expressions for light. For example, we can use an LPE to perhaps distort the glossy reflection of an object to make it look otherworldly. AOVs, or arbitrary output variables, allow direct visualization of key material properties to discover anomalies or inconsistencies across characters and environments in order to ensure that we have well-behaved materials before the full production lighting phase begins. We can use these light path expressions in AOVs as layers to input into pluggable display filters that take those shader outputs and do operations like cartoony post-processing and more. We can art direct many different looks and styles with Moonray. In this slide, I like the dust on a translucent ball there, so that's why I put it in there. Moonray is actively developed, battle-tested, and in use at DreamWorks for our recent and upcoming feature films, such as Trolls Band Together, which is out in theaters right now. We range between 92 and 154 million core hours for a DreamWorks feature. As we continue to develop Moonray's capabilities to support the ever-growing needs of our feature film productions, we are definitely excited to see how its open sourcing can make it even stronger. And this is just to give you an idea of the kind of data that we render. It's a lot. And the complexity of the scenes that we render. I'm amazed at the attention to detail given to every single frame of our movies, particularly when I sit in on dailies and listen to production leads and department heads give notes on such exacting and seemingly small details that would be difficult to see at 24 frames a second. However, it is exactly these kinds of details that, although an individual item on screen for, say, less than a second may not uniquely stand out to the viewer, they absolutely add to the extraordinarily rich and comprehensive worlds that we create. It's what makes our movies visually memorable and cumulatively add to the richness of the experience. Let's continue on. We made an initial proof of concept in 2012 as a project called Orchid. Our goals with this project were to demonstrate the relative ease with which we could assemble a functional MCRT core renderer, evaluate Intel's Embry as the underlying geometry ray tracing platform, identify areas in which work would be required in order to deliver a production solution, and do all of this quickly and without impacting other studio priorities and schedules. Pardon me. Here we're seeing an early demonstration of the Orchid proof of concept, focusing on fast time to first pixel for lighting changes as the light source is moved around the scene and radiance values are modified. This demonstrates the ease an artist has to make fast iterations on the scene. In the second part, we see the adjustment of material properties on a marble by decreasing its roughness and seeing how the light contribution changes. So what was next? Design it as a new renderer, implement what was missing in Embry, write the scene procedural shader and sampling APIs, and plan for an open source product. Actually, I wasn't there at the time, but I read that in the deck. They were planning way back then for an open source product. To that end, we started an experiment in about 2013 to produce an interactive renderer for product design, not for animated movies, but for product design with an effort that we called Nova. Here's an early example demonstrating hair and makeup preview for a cosmetic company. While you might think you've seen faster displays in video games, this simulation does subsurface scattering of light under the skin based on the thickness of skin and pockets of fat. There is multiple scattering in the hair to emulate accurate hair lighting. And all humans have hair fuzz on their skin, and this model includes that. It's a sophisticated model. Moonray and Nova did many product designs, such as simulated fabric and drapery designs here in situ in a room environment, and we can change those draperies. The Nova initiative also drove the development of Eris for distributed multi-machine computation and integrated Moonray well to add linear scale for rendering as the number of hosts is added to the computation. In this video, we are rendering Poppy from the movie Trolls on 14 hosts, each with 40 cores for a total of 560 cores. Each host had a Xeon 2.8 gigahertz CPU. Now this is very fast with these mini curves. It's very fast to render to that level. Our VFX supervisor on How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World saw the results achieved with Nova, and in early 2018 made an impassioned plea for MCRT. And you know rhyming rules must be followed. The following is a test scene that he set up to convince the execs that he could use it on the movie. He wanted to be sure that we knew, all of us here in the room and online, that we knew that this is only a test and is not the final surfacing, lighting, and rigging that was actually used in the movie. I can't really tell, honestly, and you likely won't either, but we need to point out this is just a test. This convinced the execs that the look could be achieved. Thank you. Yeah, that looks very beautiful. This convinced the execs that the look could be achieved with Moonray and could handle the complexity of dense foliage, shading complexity, the ease of lighting setup, and the speed of rendering. His plea for MCRT was greenlit. Thank you very much. No, I was fortunate to sit in the dailies room when the VFX supervisor made his pitch to the execs, and the mood was electric. It was such a passionate pitch that this story, the world, and the characters in it deserved the richness that Moonray would bring to the look of the film, and he was right. It's a gorgeous and beautiful film, full of artistry. Of course, now that this particular technology was sold, the show still needed to get made, and we were on a deadline with a fixed release date for the movie. We had a lot of work to add some required features into the renderer, as well as get it running across the show's entire pipeline so that artists could use it. Our strategy was simple. We deferred anything and everything which had a workaround to achieve the show's look, and we focused exclusively at first on those things which had absolutely no workaround. For instance, we needed to support crowds and volumes, such as fire. In fact, at the time that we were greenlit to be used on the movie, we did not have a volumes integrator at all, and one of our engineers did brilliant work to develop one in time for the full production pipeline to ramp up. Lots of caffeinated drinks and metal music were in that delivery. He loved it. There's nothing like a cool challenge to meet. Many people may think that How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World is about base-jumping Vikings, or the evolving relationship between a boy and his dragon, or the loss of loved ones, or the depiction of disability and the characters that thrive nonetheless. And these are all true. The movie could have also been titled, in my opinion, How to Break Your Renderer, as it is also true that this is a movie about some of the hardest rendering challenges to overcome. Many scenes with indirect light sources, depth of field, volumes of all sorts, clouds, fog, fire, water, and smoke. This is one moody film. The acclaimed cinematographer Roger Deakins was a visual consultant, and it shows. Although The Hidden World was the first feature rendered with Moonray, and while its production pipeline was ramping up, we also rendered a short, Bilby, on Moonray to test what was working and what we needed to improve. The short was first released at the Annecy Film Festival in 2018 and received a Jury's Choice Award at that year's SIGGRAPH conference. Now today, a special treat for everybody in attendance and online, as there isn't a session directly after this one, I will present, after my presentation is done and Q&A is done, I will present the Bilby short in its entirety at the end. It's only 8 minutes long. You feel free to, go take a break or watch it and then take your break. I do think it's worth sticking around to watch. It's a nice movie. Let's continue on. So, Moonray sounds great. What an amazing technology. So why on earth did we open source it? Let's start with our timeline. We got the green light to open source in January of 2022, though we'd been working on pitching the idea internally with the execs for a year and a half prior to that. Once we had the green light, we moved pretty quickly to initiate and start the project in March with an ambitious goal to release it by the end of the year. We reorganized our roadmap to carve out some activities in the project, which I'll discuss in the next slide, and the team got busier than they already were. We decided to announce our intent to open source at SIGGRAPH in August of 2022. That generated significant interest in the graphics community, and we gave an impromptu presentation at the co-located open source days hosted by the Academy Software Foundation at the same time. We invited people to sign up for news and beta testing, and a bit more than 4,000 people did so. The team continued working on getting everything ready, along with doing our normal development for our future productions. However, we missed our internally set deadline for an end-of-year release. Basically, we knew by mid-November we weren't going to make it at the quality we felt we needed for the initial launch, so we broke the news, but committed ourselves to a Q1 launch in 2023. Also, we wanted to have Christmas with our families, right? And that's just what we did. Open Moonray was launched live on March 15th, and we made it. Since then, we've made an additional 4 update releases. The latest, to my colleagues back in Los Angeles, was yesterday, but for us here in Riga, this was today. we just released our latest update today. So this is just a bit shy of a new release every couple of months that we're doing. We focused on a few core items for getting to open source. Of these, the two largest by far were replacing our internal build system of scones and standing up a robust documentation site. So I just mentioned we replaced our build system from scones with CMake. We extricated the code base from our internal library dependencies. We did some minor code cleanup and refactoring, and we stood up a brand new public documentation website. Our goal throughout all of this was to provide a system and documentation as thorough as possible, given our time deadline for first launch that we knew would not be perfect or final, but good enough so that people would want to come back after our first visit. So we asked ourselves, if we were searching for an open source project, what would we minimally want to see? I did mention that we're updating our repos approximately every 2 months. So far, this has been a good cadence for us as we develop new features for our productions and for us to stage our release and do all regression tests, scans for FOSS hits, et cetera, like that. We've been open source for a bit over 6 months now. So what else has been going on since then? Well, for starters, a ton of documentation additions and updates. We're nearly through our core set of documentation, taken from a variety of wiki pages of questionable timeliness, to be honest, and improved it all, adding videos and images to show off the features as best as we can. This new documentation site has actually become our go-to for all things moonray internally with our productions. What's coming up next? In the near term, we have a strong focus on updating our pipeline and tools for the next version of the VFX reference platform. Many studios are attuned to the VFX reference platform as it specifies specific versions of softwares that are known to be compatible with each other. This next feature I actually had is coming up soon, but hey, we made a release today, so we're ahead of the game. We've created a brand new telemetry data from our computation data in Eris with the Eris backend of multi-machine rendering, which we provide as a visual overlay to the renderer so that we can inspect, optimize, and debug multi-machine rendering, which can be otherwise quite difficult to do. And I'm going to cover that tomorrow in a session that's geared specifically around Eris. What's coming up in the future? We're keen to iterate on our XPU mode. So we do have an XPU mode where we run, actually, we utilize the graphics card as a GPU solution, so we use it as a coprocessor. We don't run the entire renderer on the GPU. We use it as a coprocessor to the CPU rendering. We're keen to iterate on that and pile even more work there by processing primary arrays in that mode. Right now, our current implementation processes just occlusion or shadow rays. Of course, also implement new features to help our productions push the look in all of their new upcoming shows. We've also accepted our first individual contributions, and we look forward to many more. Please send us your contributor license agreement if you wish to contribute. Speaking of which, I mentioned Intel developed the open source open image denoise library for CPU and GPU, and we'd like to thank them for contributing that integration to Moonray, and we're pleased to see it as part of its capabilities. We found that the 4004 Morehouse asset that Intel also open sourced earlier this year to be useful to validate our Hydra implementation and compliance. And in the reel that we just watched, we rendered that asset on one host with no denoising, one host with denoising, 32 hosts with no denoising, and 32 hosts with denoising. Additionally, in collaboration with the Metal ecosystem engineering team at Apple, we have Moonray up and running seamlessly on Apple Silicon with full support for XPU mode using Metal. Thanks to Apple Silicon and its large unified memory pool that both the CPU and GPU can access, we have the ability to render large assets that are difficult to render when the BVH doesn't fit in the VRAM of a discrete GPU. In other words, it's amazing to see that we can run Moonray comfortably on a laptop. My favorite part of this video is watching the CPU core count light up at the bottom right there. Now, this is a feature production quality scene that's called A-Lab, which was kindly open sourced earlier this year by the studio Animal Logic. And here we're showing the A-Lab scene rendering at about 60% complete on a Mac. And if you notice, we are toggling the Intel's OpenImage denoise on and off. So you see it get a little bit smooth, a little bit grainy, a little bit smooth, a little bit grainy. We're toggling the denoising on and off there. So, regarding why we chose to open source, we believe in the strength and the resilience of the open source community, and we hope that moonray excites the graphics community and allows the code base to grow stronger, and establish and develop partnerships with educational institutions, companies, and individuals. To be transparent, we do think moonray is a great tool in the arsenal for those who will adopt it, but there are selfish reasons for us to provide this technology to the open source community. We want to use moonray with partner studios, but there was no way for artists to learn moonray except inside of our studio. We absolutely want this effort to extend moonray's reach. We want access to the smart, creative folks in the open source community. And it's already proved a success. I mentioned that Intel has provided integration with their machine learning denoiser that's also open source, and we partnered with Apple to get it running there. And I know that DreamWorks itself is entirely a Linux shop. This is a conference hosted by a Linux company, but yes, one last call out for contributors. We don't feel like we need to own the entirety of moonray, its plugins, nor its variants. Honestly, we personally are not going to benefit if it gets onto Windows, but we think the community at large could, and we feel like others can and should be experts in many diverse areas of moonray. So this is a transparent and fairly materialistic view of some of the reasons why we want to open source this technology. However, we have other motivations as well. And for this next section, I want to show off some of the stuff we've done with moonray that showcase its application outside of feature animation. And let's continue on. There we go. First up is in the 3D printing space, where we collaborated with HP to integrate a specialized shading model, which allows us to render and visualize a 3D printed object before incurring the cost of doing the actual printing. Here's a picture of the scanner that HP has. The 3D printed exemplars, or 6 sides of a cube, are laid out on the scanning bed and scanned, and this example shows us scanning the normals. The 36 resulting textures, 6 sides times 6 types of data, are then projected onto a 3D model in moonray. This describes the AXF shading model developed by Xrite and used to model 3D printed objects. Here's a contrived example of what the resulting scans look like visualized as texture maps and how each plug into the shading model on the previous slide. Each scanned image is used as a texture map to derive the parameters of the AXF material model. We use a technique called triplanar projection to apply the scanned textures to the 3D model, resulting in a moonray render of our widget model using the AXF material, which was fed by those real scans from the 3D printed exemplars to acquire the texture data. However, the 3D printing process has some limited resolution, so here we modified our widget model to show what that would look like. The scale of the stair-stepping is accurate to their printing resolution. Finally, we show the actual 3D printed model compared to the render. Oh, I got more. Next up is in the VR space, where we've integrated vNova's Presence Z SDK as a VR camera in moonray. Presence Z renders a box from which all points of view are traced to the outer volume of the box and generates a point cloud, thus allowing 6 degrees of movement within that box, so that a person can look around, tilt their head, and look behind objects in the scene. In other words, it's not a flat painting on a cylinder that one is standing inside of. In this video capture of our VR session, we've rendered 5 boxes within the scene. Again, it's the A-Lab scene. It was open sourced earlier this year by the studio Animal Logic. And with 5 VR boxes, we allow greater horizontal movement around the room to inspect all the gadgets. In this VR session, we'll step outside of the boxes, and the viewer can then see them all stacked horizontal next to each other. And I'm going to just go forward a little bit here so we can see that. And there you see we're stacking boxes next to each other that we've rendered in the scene. Next up is I'm going to show a test that we did of real-time motion capture with Moonray and Eris. So we did this test in early 2016 on our motion capture stage. The configuration we set up is a good example for the Eris framework. The test is showing real-time rendering with Moonray. The front-end application is Autodesk Motion Builder on the left, which receives live mocap data and streams to the Eris backend. We dedicated 18 Eris hosts to the test, each with InfiniBand connections. The total core count was 40 cores per host times 18 hosts, or 720 cores. The CPU on the host was a 2.8 gigahertz Intel Xeon. The Eris backend consisted of 3 parts: 1 host for deformation, 2 hosts for wind and collision simulation, and 12 to 16 hosts for rendering with Moonray. Our frame budget was 41 milliseconds to render in order to achieve 24 frames a second. Within this 41 milliseconds, we needed to finish 2 phases for rendering. First, the render prep phase, which reads the scene data and the delta changes, and secondly, the MCRT phase, which actually calculates the ray intersections. Render prep took about 5 milliseconds, or 10% of our budget, and the MCRT phase took around 35 milliseconds, or 90% of our budget. And as you can see, the latency was a couple of frames from the incoming live mocap data to the final render, but the overall throughput was 12 to 24 frames per second, and so we achieved our goal. We consider this to be quite impressive for CPU-based rendering back in 2016. Let's look at a multi-context workflow. What do I mean by a multi-context workflow? Well, one example is that a look development artist can benefit from the ability to render multiple takes of the same asset, allowing them to test their work under different lighting conditions simultaneously to make sure that their carefully crafted materials hold up under any lighting condition. In this video example, we're showing asset development under multiple lighting conditions in a single session using Eris. It took a few seconds to transfer the scene and asset data to the back end and distribute it to the nodes, and once we got going, we get fast delta updates as we pan the camera around and change radiance values. The artist can see and manipulate the asset under 4 lighting conditions at once: daylight, overcast, dusk, and night. And I believe that the van asset here is called Mr. Licky. Yeah. So to close on our motivation to open source, I mentioned some of the standard things that benefit most open source projects, but I do want to touch on something more basic in having that desire to share, and that is a sense of accomplishment. We are tool builders, and one of the neatest things about this job is not just building the tool itself, but seeing it put to use, and particularly seeing it put to use in ways we never dreamed of. Artists do amazing work, and we often find ourselves surprised and delighted in the ambitious look of our films. It's stunning to think that they made something with such beautiful imagery and emotions using tools that we built. We take pride in seeing what people do with our tools in the graphics community. Why not share and expand that? After all, where does our sense of accomplishment come from? Watching people make something amazing from that which you've given, instructed, or instilled in them. And we are in a continuous cycle of being learners and being teachers. Open source, we feel, is a virtuous circle. I watched the legendary skateboarder Rodney Mullen, inventor of the ollie and many other street skating tricks, give a TED Talk comparing the skateboarding community to the open source community. He describes that the unique environment skaters play in drive the creation of new tricks, fostering prolific ingenuity purely for passion's sake. And I'd like to quote him now. Quote, "There is an intrinsic value to creating something for the sake of creating it. Better than that, there is this beauty of dropping it into a community of your own making and seeing it dispersed and seeing younger, more talented, just different talent, taking it to levels you could never imagine, because that lives on. We wholeheartedly agree. I'd like now to share some final thoughts. In development for 10 years, and the last 6 years are its active life as the production renderer at DreamWorks, our key focus since the beginning has been performance, and production features have ramped up. The challenge is to maintain a high level of performance while we continue to grow this feature set. Moonray has achieved a strong foundation for feature animation production at DreamWorks, and we are excited to see where it goes outside the studio and even within other industries in academia. I'd like to thank the Moonray and Eris teams at DreamWorks for being such awesome folks to work with and almost as pretty as everybody here in this room. I'd also want to give a big thank you to Canonical for hosting the event and allowing me to introduce Moonray and our journey to open source with you all. I'm going to apologize to my team. You guys are just as pretty. And especially thank you all for your time and attention. We're excited to share in this technology and eager to get talking even more about Moonray with you all. Thank you.
Very good job.
Thank you, Vince. So I think we're up at time, actually. And oh, we have 4 minutes. Would you like to take some questions?
I'll take any questions.
Fantastic. Raise your hand if you have a question. Back there. We have a mic headed toward you.
Were there any major concerns or blockers from executives and other stakeholders when you were trying to open source? And if so, how did you overcome those?
Major concerns or blockers? Not particularly. I think overall it was just a convincing argument that we made over time to say, hey, this technology is not the secret to our movies. We make movies. Secret to our movies is our artistry and the stories that we tell. And this technology deserves to be out there in the world. We've invested many millions of dollars, and this technology's been under development by a team for many years now. We've invested many millions of dollars in it, and why keep it hidden behind doors if it's not, this is not, we're not out there selling the product, right? Other people do that. We're out there to make movies. And so, our executives, they listen. Might take them a while, but they listen.
Awesome, thank you.
Do you know off the top of your head what license it was released under, and how much consideration did you give to the license when you're open sourcing it?
Yeah, we gave a lot of consideration to it, and it's Apache 2.0. Feel free to use it. Make a company, Make a company that does, I don't know, back-end rendering services on the cloud or something.
Do you think the future of film rendering is still CPU, or maybe specialized hardware or GPU rendering?
Well, GPU has obviously got everybody's attention. It's very, very fast. It's nowhere close to being, the memory capabilities aren't anywhere close to being able to do the kind of features that we do. Just our scenes are far too large.
It's just a memory issue? It's not like compute problem with the algorithms?
Not really a compute problem with the algorithms, more the memory.
Thanks.
If you scale up a huge GPU render farm, though, I'm sure you can get it done at a larger expense, for sure.
So you talked about porting to CMake and everything. Most graphics people that I know don't know how to build software. Is there any plans to engage with the community to get it packaged properly in an archive of Ubuntu or Debian, or into a snap package, or into a Flatpak?
I would love it. Come talk to me. Our team internally, we're highly focused on our own productions, and our own productions do not need that. So it would be a very long time before we would do that ourselves. Exactly.
We just extend your user base. That's right. Time for one more question.
So you talked about convincing the executives of open sourcing it. Do they see this project, the open sourcing part, do they see that as like a testing ground? And if so, what metrics do they have to see whether or not this open sourcing was successful?
Probably they do see it as a little bit of a, like, hey, look at this. Look how well the technology did. We got a lot of great feedback. We got a lot of people who forked the code right away, a lot of people who favorited us on GitHub. All of these things are looked at. We have analytics on our page, so we know roughly how many users are coming in. It's still quite a lot. So yeah, I think all of these things are quite positive for our rollout.
Thank you, Randy, so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Do you have time to show the video?
What's that?
Do you have time to show the video now? The video,
Oh, yeah, we'll get yeah.
Okay.
So we have something special if you want to stick around, but officially, there's a refreshment break starting in Hall 1 and 2, second floor. Our next talk is at 4:30, but yeah, I think you have something special for us planned.
Yeah, I mentioned if anybody wants to stick around, the very first thing that we ever rendered with Moonray was a short called Bilby, and we've got the Bilby here today, and we're going to show it. Feel free to stick around, or you can leave. You're not going to hurt any feelings here. But I would like to show that off. I think it's nice to see. And with that,